Last semester, I taught a scenario planning course at New York University's Interactive Telecommunications program. We look at scenarios for new media. We do a public presentation at the end. And there were 5 scenarios, 5 relatively uncheerful scenarios. They were the migration of privilege from the US and Europe to China and India, the complete failure of intellectual property laws, the end of privacy, a long drawn-out future of economic decline in which the value of a college education diminishes because there are no jobs for the graduates, and a pandemic. The presenters were all students in their 20s and 30s. The people in the audience were older, and one of them said, you know, these are pretty bleak. Don't you have any hopeful scenarios? And one of the students looked at him and said, well, these are the hopeful ones. I actually, or more precisely, said, we didn't think these were hopeless. And what he meant by that was that every one of these scenarios would represent a challenge, but in every one of the stories there were ways for the individuals to rise to the challenge. But they all involve changes in the way people live. I believe that there's a plausible scenario in which there's a rapid economic recovery. But even under that plausible scenario, it's not definite, but it's plausible, okay? As a scenario planner, you don't worry about probabilities. You say, is there a plausible one? Yes. Is there a plausible scenario that things get much worse? Yes. Either way, joblessness is an issue. Not just because of lack of credit and you know, protectionism and all the other reasons, but simply because of automation and productivity and the ability to do more work with fewer people. There is going to be, therefore, a rise in the underground economy. There's going to be a lot of tension around services. There's going to be a huge amount of stress on people. And we've been in future shock so long that for many of us, it looks like stability. And many of us are still trying to remain normal, you know, to have children, raise children, have homes, feel accomplished, keep to a normal way of life. And, you know, Michelle talked about plasma TVs and overpriced tennis shoes, and I think that's true to an extent. There was a certain amount of indulgence, but I actually don't think most of the using homes like ATMs came out of self-indulgence. Especially for people with children, I think it was spent trying to maintain the increasingly difficult task of leading a normal life, especially when things like college tuition costs have doubled every 9 years. In the face of all this, people cope in one of 2 ways. Either they they take the remaining 3 hours of sleep that they have each night and they cut that in half in order to cover the time for the 3rd job, or they change the way they live. They move further away, they find a form of work that involves less commuting, they look for more flexible work, they set up different relationships, they create different kinds of lifestyles inside and outside the United States. They change the way they live to make migration easier, to deal with new forms of credit. If they're women, they change the way they live and work. If they're in agriculture, they change the way they take products to markets. If they are facing pandemics and disasters, they are forced into types of communities and types of living situations that they didn't plan for. Different lifestyles are nothing new, but to the extent that survival requires choosing different lifestyles, there's a real question around how many people, how much of the time, are prepared to make that transition. Will enough of them, enough of the time, be prepared to make it that we can manage those risks? And I think the answer is maybe.